Okay, so this video is to help you with your thought process as you are trying to prove things in the coordinate grid. Okay, so this is just a suggestion of the thought process that I would recommend going through. So the first step, okay, so first step is to graph your points. All right, this is going to be first because you're either going to have 3 points or you're going to have 4 points that you're going to graph. Okay, so I'm going to start with 4 points. All right, so 4 points means it is a quadrilateral. All right. So once we know it's quadrilateral, then we want to determine what type do we think it is, okay? Do I think it's a rhombus, a rectangle, a square, or just a parallelogram, okay? So let's start with if you think it is a rhombus, rectangle, or square. Okay, if that's the case, you first must prove or be told it is a parallelogram. Okay, so sometimes you'll just be given 4 points and they'll say, explain or prove the most precise name of this figure. Sometimes you'll be given 4 points and you'll be told, prove the parallelogram is a rhombus, rectangle, or square. So if you're told it's a parallelogram, you don't have to prove it's one. If you are not told, then you have to start with that step, okay? So we would then go to, so first you must prove or be told it is a parallelogram. So prove it is a parallelogram by showing that both pair of opposite sides are parallel. Do this by calculating the slope of all 4 sides and showing the slopes of the opposite sides are equal. Okay, now I know there's a number of other ways to show that something with 4 sides, a quadrilateral, is a parallelogram. This is just the one that I would recommend. It's usually the most straightforward one for us to use, okay? So now once we've done that, okay, then I can go on to my next step. So let's say, now I know it's a parallelogram, but I still think that it is a rhombus, okay? If once we have shown it is a parallelogram, we now want to show it is a rhombus. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do for this. Find the length using the distance formula of 2 consecutive sides. Okay, remember consecutive sides, those are sides next to each other. So this is the opposite of opposite sides. Opposite sides are across from each other. Consecutive sides are next to each other. Okay, so find the length using the distance formula of 2 consecutive sides and show they are the same. Okay, if I can do that, if I've shown it's a parallelogram and then I do that, now I've shown it's a rhombus. Okay, let's say I think it is a rectangle. If we think it is a rectangle. Okay, so first we showed it's a parallelogram. Then our next step, use that slope again. So this is kind of straightforward. We already found the slopes of all the sides to show it was a parallelogram. Now we're going to use those slopes again to show that two consecutive, so that word again, sides have slopes that are opposite reciprocal. All right, so take those slopes you already found, okay, list those out, and show that they are the opposite reciprocal. So we would say something like these slopes are opposite reciprocal, therefore their lines are perpendicular and form a right angle. Okay, so use slope to show that two consecutive sides have slopes that are opposite reciprocal. This shows those sides are perpendicular and therefore form a right angle. Okay? And then lastly, if I think it is a square, if we think it is a square, then do both of these things. All right, so once we know it's a parallelogram, if we think it's a square, we would need to do the rhombus, so show those two consecutive sides are equal, and the rectangle, show those two consecutive sides are perpendicular, okay? All right, so there's if we have 4 points, 4 sides. What if we have 3? Well, if we have 3 points, so we've already graphed them, that's always our first step, then it must be a triangle. Okay, so again, we would look at it. What do we think? Do we think it's scalene? Do we think it's isosceles? Do we think it's equilateral? Or do we think it's a right triangle? Okay, so let's walk through these. If we think the triangle is isosceles, use the distance formula to find the length of the two sides we believe are equal and show their lengths match. Okay, so if we do the distance formula on those two sides, we show those lengths match, then we know it must be isosceles. All right, if we think the triangle is scalene, we would use the distance formula, a lot of distance formula here, to find the lengths of all of the sides to show pen went out, hold on. To show none of them match. Okay, so there's scaling. Equilateral then is basically just the opposite of that. If we think the triangle is equilateral, use the distance formula to find the lengths of all of the sides to show they all match. Okay, so basically the exact opposite of scaling. Scaling, I find them all to show that none match. Equilateral, I find them all to show that they all match. Okay, and lastly, if we think any of these, okay, because remember isosceles or scaling could also be a right triangle. So if I think either of those is a right triangle, if we think it is a right triangle, find the slope of the two sides we believe make up the right angle and show these slopes are opposite reciprocal. Okay, if they're opposite reciprocal, then the lines are perpendicular and therefore form a right angle. All right, hopefully this helps you with your thought process here. Feel free to go back, rewatch, rewind, anything like that, and good luck working through the review.